TikTok banning what it's calling climate change misinformation, banning anything it claims doesn't meet the scientific consensus, saying, quote, "We do not allow inaccurate, misleading, or false content that may cause significant harm to individuals or society, regardless of intent." Gabby Hoffman is the host of the District of Conservation podcast, and she joins me now. Gabriella, thanks for being here. Look, this seems like China is exporting censorship to our shores, and the language they're using, let's go over it, inaccurate, misleading, scientific consensus, seems like it's right out of the Fauci COVID playbook. What could go wrong, Gabriella?
Thank you for having me. Good morning. And a lot can go wrong, because when a social media app that is very prone to censorship, that's kind of embedded in TikTok's model, it's the worst offender of all social media companies. And even worse, it is not under the parameters of United States law. It doesn't adhere to United States law standards. So a lot can go wrong. And I was perusing through the stipulations, what they're planning to do in terms of revamping their policies. And they talk very nice platitudes of, nature conservation and sustainability. But as we know with other issue areas, TikTok is not going to be very charitable with what is going to be acceptable and what is not going to be acceptable. They're going to adhere themselves to the United Nations standards, most likely, so you can't deviate with respect to their maybe meat policies that say that beef consumption, red meat consumption is harmful to the planet. You probably won't be able to criticize lawmakers here in the United States who subscribe to preservationist environmental policies. You won't be able to likely promote content such as hunting, fishing, and even shooting sports. And those three activities here in the United States, if we're going by American standards, they contribute the most to sustainability and conservation in this country under a law called the Pittman-Robertson Act. So I expect the worst from TikTok, given what they've been doing elsewhere. And it's going to be very much up for criticism with these policies. And that's what we should be expecting here.
It's important to note that regardless of this bravado, China is one of the, if not the worst polluter in the world. And I think Marco Rubio nailed it when he said, quote, "Censorship is the norm for Chinese tech companies, but it's notable that TikTok's censorship program is now pandering to the Biden administration's climate goals. No one should be fooled by this stunt." It will be interesting, Gabby, to see whether or not the White House calls out this hypocrisy or continues their job of promoting Chinese solar panels, which again helps the CCP. Meantime, Joe Biden's EPA is announcing the first ever crackdown on power plants that fuel our electric grid. 60%, Gabriella, of electricity generated in the U.S. last year came from burning fossil fuels. What will this move by Biden do to our ability to fill the grid?
It's going to create a lot of instability in the grid, arguably speaking. And this is Biden's response to the revoking of the Clean Power Plan from the Obama era, and also the lack of implementation, or rather the revoking of the American Clean Energy Plan under the Trump administration. So this is Biden's response to reducing supposedly greenhouse gas emissions coming from power plants. And when a policy like this is pursued, right now this is guidance. This was leaked by the New York Times. We don't know if all of this language will be included in the final rule, but going off of what we've seen them do for electric vehicles, we can only anticipate kind of the most extreme elements of this proposal to be put out in the final rule. And what you have here, when you're regulating emissions of this magnitude, it could create a lot of problems for states, for our grid, for grid stability, make us weaker energy-wise. And this also calls into question, whether or not this is legal to do. Going off of West Virginia versus EPA, because that court decision said that EPA has limited powers under the major questions doctrine. So they're trying to create this rule to go around that ruling and say, yes, we can regulate greenhouse gas emissions in this manner.
And it's also going to cost the American people a whole heck of a lot. Gabriella Hoffman, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Sure.